Thanks. I appreciate that. Mr. and Mrs. Rico, they went to a murder mystery. It was a romantic getaway. They went in Maryland to a hotel. This was back in 1998. And they wanted to get away and really celebrate their marriage. They wanted to have fun, but they also wanted to relax on a vacation. And so they went. They went to a murder mystery. And it's really interesting how this story mimics the murder mystery. She took the murder mystery dinner way too far. Stephen was a devoted husband and a great dad. He was a golf course superintendent, and his friends described him as dependable and kind-hearted. He was kind of your average guy, and they seem on the outside to live a fairly stable suburban life in Laurel, Maryland. During that Valentine's weekend, the Hirkos went to the Maryland hotel. They checked in and they participated in a murder mystery dinner. Ironically, it was called The Bride Who Cried. Why did she cry? Later, the irony of the title of the murder mystery dinner would really be ironic to the investigators because it literally mirrored what actually happened to Stephen. Early on February 15th, a fire had broke out in their hotel room, and firefighters found Stephen's body, but he was unrecognizable. He was burned so severely they didn't identify him visually. They had to do DNA and dental checks. Initial reports suggested that it was a possible accident. Stephen was a smoker. Maybe he was smoking and fell asleep and the cigarette caught on fire, and then he died from that. Makes sense. That's probable. Happens a lot. But that's not what the investigators found out. As the investigators dug into it further, they found that it was an accelerant, gasoline likely, that was poured around where Stephen was. So they ruled out an accident and they started to look at arson. This is where things start to get interesting. Kimberly, Stephen's wife, she was distraught. She was beside herself. She was sad. She was grieving. Her husband had died. She had no idea how or why. It must have been an accident. Kimberly said that she happened to go walking along the beach. She came back and then she saw the scene and her husband dead. But she wasn't telling the truth. It was something about her demeanor and her story just didn't quite sit right with investigators. Something was off. They wanted to figure out a little bit more about Kimberly's story because it wasn't quite fitting the puzzle. As the investigators dug deeper, they did forensic analysis. They did autopsy on Stephen. And now they're suspecting that, there might be some foul play going on here. As they did the toxicology test, they realized that Stephen was poisoned by a paralytic drug to relax the muscles during surgery. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. Kimberly worked in the hospital. She had access to these drugs. So, all right, Kimberly had this plan. She was distraught, acting like everything was an accident, and she had no idea how Stephen died. And she thought she was going to get away with murder. In fact, witnesses that were at the murder mystery dinner, they had interacted with Kimberly, and Kimberly had jokingly said that she would get away with murder. How bizarre is that? It was a foreshadowing of what would come. Kimberly really thought she was going to get away with murder. She did not anticipate investigators finding out about this drug, because it's not a drug that's easily identified in a toxicology report. You have to go directly with that knowledge to be able to find that. So she was not counting on that. So the likely scenario here that investigators discovered that Kimberly injected that into her husband, Stephen. He became relaxed, probably couldn't move. And then she poured gasoline or some accelerant around Stephen. She lit it on fire, and then she left to go. She probably did go on the beach to get away, and she stayed away long enough for the damage to be done. Her husband was killed, and she then told the story, she had no idea why Stephen was dead. Here's another layer to this bizarre incident. As investigators talked to Kimberly, they uncovered a web of deception. Kimberly, it turns out, was having an affair with a coworker, and a fact that obviously she kept hidden from Stephen. So she had the secret affair, didn't want Stephen to find out. And I wonder if Stephen was finding out, or maybe he just found out. Maybe that's why Kimberly killed Stephen, to get rid of him so she can have a new life with this other guy, her coworker. A friend of Kimberly's during the investigation had told authorities that Kimberly even said she wanted Stephen to just disappear. Wow. Ouch. And so she took matters into her own hands. Kimberly was a surgical technician. She had knowledge and she had access to this drug. She knew how long it would take. All of this was methodically planned ahead. They went onto this trip away from the home, so she had to pack it and plan it and time it exactly. She had the accelerant, she had the drug, she had it all planned down to the minute. And it worked exactly how she thought, but it ended exactly how she didn't think it would end. Kimberly had just taken out a $50,000 life insurance policy on Stephen just months before his death. What? Money and an affair. She's thinking a whole new life if she just get rid of Stephen. And so, as you can imagine, the investigation really starting to tighten when a friend of Kimberly's came forward. So the story just continues to get bizarre. Kimberly had told a friend months before that basically planned out the whole thing and just told it to her friend. She said that she was going to kill Stephen, inject him with this paralyzing drug, and then it would paralyze him so he couldn't move, and then a fire would cover up the murder. So that proves that this was not a spontaneous. It was well thought out, all planned. She probably had an elaborate plan to steal this drug from her workplace. She covered it up. She had this affair with a coworker, all of this happening at work. And then she probably planned the whole trip in a new environment, and she had it planned down to the minute. That's cold. That's evil. Kimberly was then arrested and charged with first-degree murder and arson. Going back to that murder mystery dinner, it's so bizarre that Kimberly would just act so nonchalant. It was as if she was acting on a stage that witnesses talked about during that dinner. She was overly friendly and happy and giddy, trying to maybe set up a personality, a persona with those around her. And it was almost as if she was rehearsing for this. It's really bizarre. Somehow maybe deflecting that she was this cold, calculated murderer. We don't know. But she was certainly acting strange during the murder mystery dinner. Investigators even found the fire alarm in their hotel room was disconnected. Kimberly even thought that detail. She didn't want the fire alarm to go off too soon because she wanted to make sure that the murder scene was destroyed by the fire. My psychological speculations here about Kimberly, again, it's not about diagnosing somebody, but it's about observing someone's behavior and taking that to formulate a speculation or a hypothesis of what might be happening inside Kimberly's mind. We know the motive is pretty clear. The life insurance policy, the affair, we kind of understand the motive. But let's talk a little bit about, well, okay, we understand the motive, but why would she go to killing her husband to get rid of him and not just divorcing? Her affair with her coworker really points to a dissatisfaction in the marriage. Yeah, lots of people are dissatisfied in their marriage. A lot of people have affairs, but not everyone resorts to murdering their spouse. But it's just interesting here that she may have really have deep-seated resentment towards her husband. The premeditation, the choosing the drug, the staging the fire, the planting a narrative of a tragic accident, it indicates a high level of manipulative planning. It was cold, it was calculated, it was premeditated. She knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't a fit of rage, it was planned out. Betrayal in relationships often stems from unmet expectations or a sense of entitlement. But for her, it took it another level. Her lack of remorse, her complete disregard, that really points to an antisocial personality disorder. It's this coming up with a completely different scenario in her mind to justify getting rid of Stephen. Stephen is in the way. I want to start a new life. I want to get rid of him. If he won't go away on his own, I'll make it happen. This likely created a cognitive dissonance within her, a conflict between her moral and her desire to create a new life for herself. It's a form of emotional detachment, a compartmentalizing, almost like it's a story, it's a fictional story or a dream that I will do this, but it's really not happening. It was almost a disassociation from reality and not even thinking about the consequences that would happen afterwards. More than likely, her husband, Stephen, had no clue. He may have had suspicions that she was having an affair, but I'm sure he wasn't thinking that she was going to kill him. Maybe he thought, well, maybe this romantic getaway on a Valentine's weekend, maybe that will rekindle our relationship. During Kimberly's trial after her arrest, it really showed out and brought out a lack of remorse in her. It was if she was a completely different person. And it really brings out confirmation here that she was cold and calculated and had little remorse, someone who is devoid of emotions and not recognizing the reality or the consequences of her actions. We may never know exactly what was going on in her mind. It goes way beyond what a typical disgruntled wife would do. Murder her husband in order to gain a life insurance and carry on her affair. It was like its own murder mystery, except this was not a mystery anymore. It was real life. It wasn't fiction. So what did you think about this case? Very interesting. Lots of psychological twists and layers here. I'm always interested in learning about what you want me to talk about next. If you have a case that you want me to talk about and analyze, I want to know. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm always looking for feedback to improve my content. What type of true crime content would you like? I'm trying to figure this out. I'm new to the genre of true crime. I've been a licensed therapist for over 2 decades, and I want to combine the two. Really interesting cases with mental health and psychological layers and twist to the cases. So I value your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe.